Let's think about this for a second. What actually elevates a tournament from being just another competition to a true watershed historical moment? I mean, is it the sheer logistical chaos leading up to it? Is it a fundamental shift in how the game is structurally played? Or maybe it's the arrival of a single generation-defining genius.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're throwing on our sports historian hats to take a real deep dive into the 1986 FIFA World Cup in Mexico. We're going to explore exactly how a tournament born out of intense political wrangling and literal earthquakes completely reshaped the modern football landscape.
To really understand this tournament's lasting impact, here's our roadmap. We'll be looking at the host chaos and earthquakes, a shift in format, how the Mexican wave goes global, Maradona's absolute masterpiece, and finally, the legacy of 1986.
Okay, Section 1, Host Chaos and Earthquakes. Let's zoom out and look at the incredible logistical and geopolitical chaos that nearly prevented this whole thing from happening. The build-up to these games was, well, incredibly turbulent. So back in 1974, FIFA actually chose Colombia to host, but by 1982, Colombia had to withdraw because they simply couldn't afford the new expanded 24-team requirements. So Mexico gets selected as the replacement host in 1983. But then, in September 1985, literally just 8 months before kickoff, this absolutely devastating earthquake struck Mexico. It cast some major doubts over the event. But remarkably, the stadium survived and the tournament pressed forward.
Now, the bidding process to replace Colombia was seriously intense. The United States and Canada submitted bids and they strongly felt they had the better infrastructure. But FIFA's executive committee ultimately went with Mexico. As you can imagine, it caused some massive international friction. In fact, Henry Kissinger, who was leading the U.S. bid committee at the time, famously remarked, "The politics of soccer make me nostalgic for the politics of the Middle East." Moving on to Section 2, a shift in format. This is where we see how this tournament fundamentally evolved the structural rules of modern football. So, in the 1982 World Cup, the second round was actually played in groups, but 1986 totally changed the game by introducing a 16-team knockout stage. You know the deal, you lose, you go home. Implementing this high-stakes bracket fundamentally changed the competitive tension of the sport. And the 86 World Cup also introduced another absolutely critical procedural change. That crucial change was introducing simultaneous matches, basically playing the final group games at the exact same time. By doing this, FIFA ensured competitive integrity. It prevented teams from colluding or just casually playing for a convenient draw based on earlier results. It was a real game changer, and it's a standard we still rely on in every major tournament today.
All right, Section 3, the Mexican wave goes global. We're now shifting our focus from the boardroom straight to the bleachers to look at the undeniable cultural footprint of the 86 games.
It's crazy to think about, but several iconic cultural touchstones originate from this single month in Mexico. First off, it saw the worldwide popularization of the famous Mexican wave spectator phenomenon. Second, players were using the Adidas Azteca. This was the very first fully synthetic World Cup match ball, and it was beautifully adorned with native Aztec-inspired architecture. And third, because the UN declared 1986 the International Year of Peace, the advertising boards in every single stadium prominently displayed UN peace logos. And tying perfectly into that UN messaging was the tournament's unofficial motto, El Mundo Unido por un Balón, which translates to the world united by a ball. It just perfectly summarized the atmosphere of this modernized, globalized broadcast phenomenon that was actively bringing nations together.
Which brings us to Section 4, Maradona's absolute masterpiece. Because, a tournament is really only as great as its players, and this is where we zoom all the way in on the ultimate individual peak of the event.
Consider the number 5 for a second. That represents the 5 goals the 25-year-old Argentine captain, Diego Maradona, scored in this tournament. But it also represents the 5 goals he directly created for his teammates. To this day, it remains one of the most dominant individual performances in all of team sports history.
But to truly understand his impact, we really have to look at the quarterfinal match between Argentina and England at the massive Estadio Azteca. And it is absolutely vital to note the immense geopolitical and emotional weight of this game. For many folks in Argentina, the match was viewed through the lens of recent history, framed as a kind of revenge for the Falklands War.
So, during the second half of this incredibly tense match, Maradona scored 2 of the most famous goals in football history. The first one? Highly controversial. He literally punched the ball past English goalkeeper Peter Shilton and right into the net.
The referee completely missed the handball and the goal stood. Maradona later famously claimed the goal was scored, a bit with the head of Maradona and another bit with the hand of God.
But any controversy from that first goal was immediately contrasted by his second. Maradona receives the ball and just dribbles half the length of the field, accelerating past 5 opposing English players to score. It was this moment of undeniable, just pure individual brilliance. In fact, it was later voted by FIFA as the goal of the century.
And his overall dominance across the entire month was frankly staggering. Just look at the voting for the Golden Ball. That's the award given to the tournament's best player. There was a massive 938-point gap between Maradona in first place and West German goalkeeper Toni Schumacher in second. It wasn't even close.
Let's quickly trace Argentina's steps through the knockout stage. Step 1. Maradona scores those 2 incredible goals against England in the quarterfinal. Step 2. In the semifinals, Maradona strikes twice more to beat Belgium 2-0. And Step 3. In the final against West Germany, with the game tied and just minutes left, Maradona threads a perfect pass to assist Jorge Baruchaga for the game winner, securing a 3-2 victory. His genius directly drove Argentina to their second world title.
And finally, Section 5, the legacy of 1986. Let's zoom back out to understand the true, lasting impact of this historic event.
So how do we actually summarize the historical impact of all this? Well, first, despite the initial logistical nightmares, it permanently cemented the high-stakes 16-team knockout format, along with those simultaneous final group matches. That forms the bedrock of the competitions we watch today. Second, it set entirely new standards in sports marketing, synthetic equipment, and global broadcast culture. And third, it brought in a staggering total attendance of nearly 2.4 million fans. It effectively established the modern framework of international football.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As the tactical frameworks of football continue to evolve, becoming increasingly structured and systematized, will a single player ever dominate a modernized World Cup format the way Maradona did in '86? Can such a perfect storm of structural evolution and individual brilliance ever be repeated? Thanks so much for exploring the history with us today on The Explainer. See you next time.